Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Jobin, and you are listening to Time to Talk, a podcast for caregivers. This podcast is dedicated to helping family caregivers in Ontario. Through expert tips and resources, you will gain knowledge and validation for the ups and downs that come with caregiving. More importantly, you'll learn that you're not alone. It's so important to take this time for yourself. We're glad you're here. Today we are joined by Social Worker Michal Goldstein to talk about something that is so vital for all of us, mental health. Michal is a registered social worker and the founder of Creating Connections, where she sees children, adults, and families for individual and group counseling. She has over a decade of experience working with caregivers to support them in improving their ability to cope with the challenges inherent in caring for someone else. Michal has developed numerous workshops and support group programs utilizing knowledge of interpersonal neurobiology and mindfulness techniques to support individuals suffering from physical health, mental health, and parenting challenges. She is passionate about bringing evidence-based practice to the forefront of the clinical social work field. Michal knows both firsthand and from professional experience the challenges that come with caring for someone with a physical and mental health illness, and is grateful for the opportunity to bring more awareness, education, and support to this community. Michal, we want to thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Michelle, for having me.
What are some of the main challenges you see caregivers facing right now? Because let's face it, these are, I don't want to say extraordinary times because that makes it sound maybe a little bit more fun than it is. But I mean, the COVID-19 pandemic has been an extra layer of challenge for caregivers. So what sort of challenges are you seeing them face right now in particular?
So amongst all the other challenges that, everybody is facing during COVID, and uncertainty being a very big factor for everybody, I think that there's an added level of that for caregivers because, not only do you have your own experience and your own uncertainty, but you have an additional layer of concern for your loved one, whether or not they're going to be able to access the medical care they need, whether or not they're going to get relief or additional support. So many caregivers relied on external support systems to be able to care for their loved one. And during this time, they don't have access to those things. And so that's a whole nother layer of challenge that's added during this time of now needing to take on the role completely on your own, right? Without maybe OTs or PTs or, other therapists or just relief because family members are coming in. That's what I'm hearing from so many caregivers that I'm working with.
There's certainly an isolation that is occurring for all of us, but I'm assuming that's incredibly amplified for caregivers.
Yeah, I mean, even before COVID, life for caregivers was, extremely challenging with a lot of unknowns, needing support, right? Needing more support, anxiety over what's going to be with their loved one, what is going to happen, are they going to be okay? And now it's, like you said, only amplified.
We know that there are some caregivers who are feeling anxious about COVID-19, and especially in those specific age groups or people that, where they themselves or the person they are giving care to have these pre-existing health issues. What tips can you give caregivers who are feeling anxious right now?
So I think the most powerful tool when you're suffering from anxiety is really the knowledge of what's happening for you. Right? When a person's feeling anxious, there are systems going on inside of them within their nervous system that impacts how they're feeling. And understanding that system, I think, is really the most powerful tool that you can have as anyone suffering from anxiety, right? So just understanding that living in a situation of ongoing stress is something that impacts a person's biological systems. It creates a situation where their fight or flight mode, if you've heard of that, their sympathetic nervous system, to be a bit more scientific, is in high gear at this time, right? So what happens is that their body and their mind are consistently sending this message like there is a danger. Just like if a person is running from, a predator or something dangerous, your body kicks into the system that says, I need to run, I need to escape, I need to get away from this thing. That's the same system that's in high gear when a person is under ongoing stress. First step, understanding that this is what's happening inside you, that this is a biological system. It's not that there's something wrong with you. It's not that there's something wrong with the situation. It's that simply ongoing stress creates this dynamic inside of us. And so having that knowledge allows us to balance that system out with what's called the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's the other side of the coin, where we can activate that by deep breathing, by meditation, by mindfulness practice, by so many different areas that we can activate that system and counterbalance what's going on for us when we're suffering from anxiety. And that's across the board. Specifically with caregivers, I would say that learning more about what's going on for them, learning more about their experience and connecting with other caregivers is a really great way to learn about all these concepts that we just spoke about and more.
So it sounds to me like taking a bit of a step back and really sort of assessing the situation that you're in, while also arming yourself with as much knowledge as you possibly can, is a good way to, get a better sense of the situation. I know personally some people that have had very high anxiety during this time. And one thing and I am by no means a professional, but one thing I have said to one person in particular, like, this isn't personal. This is happening to everyone right now. And I find that when I tell myself that, I have a better perspective on the situation.
For sure. And that's why, support as a caregiver is so beneficial, because so many of the caregivers I've worked with, when they've joined into these support groups, have been so pleasantly surprised, like, wow, this is a universal experience. And so many of the emotions that a caregiver experiences are really hard to come to terms with, whether it's guilt, whether it's anger at their loved one. And so hearing other caregivers, a group of caregivers just like themselves, saying all the same things is so impactful, right? Joining together and realizing that you're a part of something bigger than yourself.
And of course, while we may not be able to see each other in person right now, support groups online, or you can pick up the phone or call some. There are a lot of different resources, and we'll certainly talk about those within the scope of this podcast in general. So I think that's a great thing. Don't be afraid to reach out. Caregiving can be very fulfilling, yet challenging, of course. What tips do you have beyond what we've talked about already to help our caregivers maintain focus on the positive?
So positivity is like mining for diamonds, right? On the outset, everything could look really black and dark and dirty, right? And then with some skills, though, you can turn all of that darkness into diamonds, right? The power of gratitude is a really wonderful way that people can try to focus on the positive. And I know so many of the caregivers that I work with, they're so overwhelmed that it's so hard to see the positive within their experience. And really focusing on some sort of gratitude task, I find really a helpful way to stay within this realm of positivity that we want to focus on. So even just, a gratitude journal where you write down, every day 3 things that you're grateful for, or a minute of gratitude. So, I personally use this. I have an alarm set on my phone. It goes off at 10 o'clock and I have to, for a whole minute, which is really long. You wouldn't even realize how long that is. But for a whole minute, just keep talking about things I'm grateful for. Like, oh, my toast didn't burn, or my coffee was so delicious, or, my kid was so cute. And you just keep going for a minute. That's a really great tool. One of the caregivers that I worked with recently, actually, so inspirational. She had a gratitude jar where she would keep like paper and a pen next to it. And she would write to any time she would pass by, she would just write down something that she's grateful for. And, other members of the family, including the loved one that she was caring for, joined in. And the best part was that whenever somebody was feeling down in the family, they would go to that gratitude jar and pull out one of the slips and read it. And so that's a really great way to kind of flip things, switch things around when you're starting to feel like the negativity in a situation, to just flip it around and try to see the positive.
That's great advice. It's natural, given the current climate, that caregivers might feel isolated and lonely. That's why we created our caregiver support group, so caregivers can share the challenges they are facing with others. Connect by phone or online with other caregivers from the comfort of your home. With the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, it's harder than ever for caregivers to access resources and support groups. That is why the Ontario Caregiver Organization created the Caregiver Support Group. Visit ontariocaregiver.ca today to register. That's ontariocaregiver.ca to register. In one of your video series with Ontario Caregiver, you talk about the importance of being present and mindful. And I think we've touched a little bit on doing things like that so far, but why is this perspective so important to our mental health?
So being present in our current experience allows us to actually enjoy what's happening, right? So many times, if you think about, like, if you've ever eaten a meal and you just like eat and then you're finished and you're like, did I eat? What did I eat? Like, I was not there, like, I don't even remember, like, was that good? Did I taste it? Right? Because we're not present in that experience. And that happens so many times, especially in our world, with constant technology, things are always changing, right? And we're constantly on the go. We're not being as present as would be beneficial for us in our experiences. And so being present in our experiences allows us to actually enjoy them, actually experience them in a really fulsome way. And so that, for caregivers, that allows them, just like we were talking about, this attitude of gratitude, this ability to experience the positives in their life, to experience those little moments that do exist, whether it's aside from their caregiving or within their caregiving.
How does mindfulness help us to maintain positivity when we're talking about currently with the pandemic, but how to help us maintain positivity and use the pandemic as an opportunity to strengthen connections with others in our home or those who we care for?
So it's exactly that focus on what's happening in front of you, right? So many times we'll look back at our day and we'll be like, that was a good day, that was a bad day, as if one moment in time within the day has the ability to shift our whole perspective on the day. I don't, if you have kids, you've heard them, I had such a bad day. Well, what happened? And they'll name one thing, like maybe it was a minute, right? A minute of their day that shifted their entire perspective about the day. So we have the ability to do the opposite. We have the ability to focus on specific moments in our day or specific moments in our caregiving relationship that are positive, whether it's that warm smile, if you're caring for an elderly parent and that warm smile they gave you when you walked into the room, or maybe that one thank you, because sometimes there aren't many thank you got for that task that you completed for them. And putting our attention and our focus on these small moments is what can create an experience of a good day or a positive, warm relationship with our loved one.
And, I know, we touched on this in relation to the pandemic, but really these lessons are forever. And I think a lot of us are going to carry those forward with us. I know personally, my definition of a good day has shifted in the last however many months at this point. And, despite the challenges, one thing that I do know is that I have never had the ability in my son's life to spend this much time with him since I was on maternity leave. So that's just my personal story. But, looking for those silver linings, as cliche as it may sound, has really had the ability, given me the ability to shift my perspective in terms of what I feel is important going forward. There are gifts that we can find in all of this.
Right. I think a big obstacle for people when it comes to, this focusing on, positivity, or, finding different tasks of gratitude to complete. I think the challenge is often when people are feeling, in a very low place or really overwhelmed, is that it's very challenging to focus on those things and to think that that's actually going to make a difference, right? But what we know is that it's not just about how we look at a specific experience, it's how it shifts our overall perspective. And that being mindful, being present in our experiences and being grateful, finding things to be grateful about, does shift our perspective, right? So I had a friend of mine who she did this gratitude task. I don't know if you've ever heard about this, but that you take pictures of things that you're grateful for and you log them. I think it was like a 30-day challenge, and every day she would send out the pictures, right? And she said by the end of it, she was like noticing so much more, because she had to notice things that were beautiful or things she wanted to snap, right? And it just draws your senses into what there is beautiful in your experience, right? So it's just about, I would just want to encourage people that, try it. Like you're cynical about it. You don't think it will work. Just try it. You never know what it could do for your experience.
And I fully understand, and you work with a lot of caregivers in your own practice, and I understand that you have some personal experience with this as well. When you do work with people that are giving care to loved ones, and they have a schedule that is perhaps more challenging because of that, do you see them having this sort of shift in mindset when they start to shift their focus?
For sure. Because, the same things are happening in our day. It's not like we have to do something different or take more time. The same things are happening in the day. It's just about where we're putting our attention, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So when we put our attention to the enjoyable parts of our day, then our day is enjoyable.
The Ontario Caregiver Organization has created a series of free webinars to help caregivers in their role. From financial planning for caregivers to mental health, these webinars provide support and resources to caregivers across the province on a wide range of topics. Our goal is to help ease the everyday stresses and challenges of being a caregiver. You're not alone. We're here for you. Register for an upcoming webinar today at ontariocaregiver.ca. I wanted to talk a little bit about caregiving in general and balance, that very tricky word that is sometimes elusive, but it also depends on how you're looking at things, and scheduling and stability. Why do you think that having and maintaining a schedule is so important for our mental health, and specifically for those of us that are caregivers? And we did touch on the fact that sometimes their schedules can be a little bit busier or more challenging than others.
So the idea of creating for yourself a schedule, and especially when, things are more chaotic, whether it's because of a pandemic or because of hospital visits or, because of other factors of your life, right? I always tell caregivers, there's more to you than just the fact that you're a caregiver. It's a beautiful, important aspect of your life, but you have a whole rest of your life that exists outside of this. And so in order to ensure that you are tending to all of those aspects of yourself, you need to be able to create space for that, right? When we think about ourselves in the context of our loved one, I try to reshift the clients that I work with, their attention. I try to reshift their attention back to themselves. So many times the person that they're caring for is in the middle of their whole focus, right? They are the center of their attention at all times of the day. And I challenge them to shift that perspective, to put themselves back in the center, to put themselves in the middle, and their caregiver being one of the many aspects of their life that they tend to. And to create a schedule and a routine helps to create boundaries between yourself and other, whether it's themselves and their loved one, or themselves and, their spouse or their work, right? So the schedule sort of creates defined lines, right? Time time spaces that you're devoting to specific things, and ensuring that you create the space in your schedule for things that are important to you as an individual, right? As much as you love your loved one, want to care for them, it could bring you pleasure and enjoyment, right? You can feel fulfilled from that. But there are other aspects to self that are so important to not neglect.
How do you suggest, or how would you advise a caregiver to insert self-care into their routine? Is it as simple as putting it into a schedule, or what would you tell one of your clients?
So the first step is to really take stock of these things. Like, how am I doing in these areas? I have a blog post on my website that actually goes into a number of different areas, right? Whether it be spiritual, professional, emotional, physical, social areas of self that require self-care, right? That can benefit from self-care. And I go into each area and give examples of ways that we can incorporate that we might not have even thought of, right? So, for example, take professional self-care. Just maybe taking 2 minutes to clean up your workspace, right? To make it look neat, maybe add a little plant there and make it pretty, right? Can change so much about the way you experience your day, right? Just setting aside those 2 minutes to be able to tend to yourself. It not only creates a more pleasant working environment, but it also sends a message to yourself that you're important, right? My space matters. And that affects the way you experience self, and it affects the way you also experience your caring of your loved one. You're going into that care, let's say you're working, you have your job, and every 3 hours you have to go check on your loved one who's maybe in your home. When you're experiencing your life for those 3 hours in a pleasant, calm manner, then your whole demeanor when you go to interact with your loved one is going to be completely different. And so all of these areas, whether professional or social, emotional, like I said, they all have ways that we can just shift a little bit, or, take something on in under a minute, things that you can do that don't even take time, right? They're just about perspective shifts, or the way you think about something, or making a phone call that you can do while you're doing other things, right? There's so many areas that we can expand ourselves in our self-care that, don't have to affect our limited amounts of time that we have.
Right. It's not necessarily all like bubble baths with a glass of wine or things like
Yeah,
that. So
exactly.
it's not that sort of thing.
Exactly.
And, I love that you bring up looking at the different aspects of your life and how you can apply self-care to that. And I say that as my office is just out of eyesight and it's a mess right now. And you know what? I don't like to be in there. And that's
Right.
why, because I've got stacks of paper on my desk that I keep saying, oh yeah, I'll get to it. I'll get to it.
Exactly.
So it is about, self-care really is about making all of the aspects of your life work better for you, I assume.
Exactly. And I think it's really that message that I mentioned before is so important and affects so much the way you feel about yourself, right? Yeah. When I take 2 minutes to do something for me, it makes such a difference for how you feel about yourself, right? Mm-hmm. And that's so important for any person in their interaction with the world, is that they're entering those interactions with positivity and with feeling whole and complete and good about themselves.
And I assume self-care in terms of priorities is different for each individual. So we should really sort of focus on what aspects that we, for some people, it's fitting more exercise in. For some people, it's eating better. For some people, it might be being more organized. So I assume that we need to kind of scan our lives and figure out where we feel we are lacking.
Yeah, I have like an image of a pie graph sort of, and you could divide it evenly between each of these areas, or you can say, for me, spiritual self-care is my optimal focus, and I less on social self-care, for example, or my professional career is not the key for me, but rather my physical self-care and making sure I'm eating well and exercising and just taking a minute to put on hand lotion, right? That's self-care in its own right.
And the fact that you bring up things that take, say, a minute or 2 minutes, I am hooking into the fact that we're not talking about necessarily taking a huge amount of time, because again, we are speaking about our caregivers that often feel pressed for times in many aspects of their lives. So I do think it's helpful that you're saying, look, it doesn't have to be an hour here or 2 hours or things like that. It can be something that happens in a small amount of time.
Yeah, that blog post I referred to before is called Self-Care in Under a Minute.
Oh, perfect. What would you say, it can happen sometimes that caregivers are in environments that don't necessarily support their self-care. Is there any advice that you could give on how they might be able to address this?
So there are so many things in life that we can't control, right? We can't control necessarily always our environmental circumstances. I mean, everyone can understand that now after this pandemic that we've been living through. And a person has to just always look at their goals, right? What is it that they want to see in their life? What are the changes that they want to see in their personal experiences? And to be that change. So any small shifts that we make where we're standing right now, the trajectory of a situation down the road will significantly change based on those small shifts that you make here and now, right? And so people often feel like in order for things to be better, big changes need to happen. But really, small things that we do, just like the self-care we were just talking about, really can make a significant difference on how we view things and how we experience things down the road. So focusing on and putting more attention to yourself can significantly change a situation, whether or not the actual situation changes. And so many caregivers that I speak to, that is their experience, right? They can't change what they need to accomplish in a day. They can't change what they need to tend to. And so, being able to look at the areas of their life that they want to see different is where they can put their attention and how they can stay in a more positive and healthy place around their situation when it can't change.
And I assume that reaching out to a professional like yourself or to some peer support groups might be a great place to sort of start with that or feel more validation.
For sure, because I think that every person has obstacles that stand in their way sometimes in terms of accomplishing their goals and accomplishing the changes that they want to see. And everybody has their sticking points, right? Like, this isn't going somewhere. Why is that? And so reaching out to a professional is very helpful with that and being able to assess, why isn't this working, right? So much of the work I do with my clients is, okay, let's try this, right? We've come up with a plan based on our conversation. Let's try this. And then we're going to come back together next week, in 2 weeks or whatever it is. And we're going to reassess what worked and what didn't work, because not everything's going to work in our specific situation, right? And we have to just constantly reassess, take stock, what's working, what isn't, what areas of my life am I tending to, what areas of my life am I neglecting? And that constant taking stock can help us to create a better future.
You've had some wonderful advice for us, for our caregivers today, and we appreciate that. But you've also mentioned your blog, and I'm sure many people will want to look into a little bit more about the work that you do. How can people find you?
So you can access the blog through my website, which is www.creatingconnections with an S at the end.ca. You can also find me on Psychology Today. Just search my name, Michal Goldstein.
Well, we thank you so much for being here today, Michal.
Okay, thank you so much, Michelle. It was a pleasure.
Thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. You can access more details about support services on our website, ontariocaregiver.ca. Until next time, I'm Michelle Jobin, and you have been listening to Time to Talk, a podcast for caregivers. We hope you have a wonderful day.